Okay, so welcome everyone to the Undergraduate Research Education Series. As most of you probably at this point know, Stephanie Shiver, work in the Office of Undergraduate Research. I will post in the chat the link to the Education Series evaluation form. For those of you attending right now at the live version, you don't have to fill that out. It's optional. It's really helpful to us, but totally up to you. For those of you watching the recorded version later, please do fill out the evaluation form. That's how I know that you watched the video for it to count for your Europe attendance requirement. I do apologize for scheduling events the day after the election when people are feeling very tense. Hopefully, we're hoping this is a nice distraction for everyone. But if you're mad at me, I understand and I'm sorry. So we're going to hear from Chideraa, who is a graduate student in chemistry and also a person with multiple job offers, which is very exciting. And we're going to learn about chemistry in everyday life. So Chideraa, take it away.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Stephanie, for the introduction and having me here. So I'm really excited to talk about chemistry, which is like when I signed up to give this talk, I was thinking about what could I say to motivate undergrads. And one thing that I really love about chemistry is that there's a lot of color in it. Like there's so much color, so you can see I have like very colorful things about chemistry. There's also like this really acronym that I got online that kind of like describes chemistry in everyday life. So you said you have chemistry in the community, there's chemistry, health, for H is health, E is for the environment, M it's medicine, I industry, S science, T teaching, R research, and then finally in U. So when I saw this, I was super excited, which is actually true. You find chemistry really in everything. Like Stephanie said, a fourth year PhD student in chemistry, which kind of like makes sense why I chose the topic. But really the goal of today's seminar, it's really not to talk so much about chemistry, but really to see how many people are kind of excited about chemistry. There are quite a number of people, I guess, that probably don't know much about chemistry or like super not interested in chemistry. So I think really that's my goal today, is to at least get one person to be excited about chemistry, and hopefully someone decides today to go into chemistry or take chemistry as a career. So to go a little bit about my background, I just want to talk like a little bit briefly about my background. So I was born in Owerri, Imo State, which is in Nigeria. It's a small town of about 1.7, not a small town, relatively average size town, 1.7 million people. That was where I was born and raised. And then I did my high school also in the same state. So I'll probably say a little bit about my journey in chemistry. It's that when I first started high school, by the time I started taking chemistry classes, I was kind of like very excited about every other science courses, but chemistry was really the one that caught my attention, and really one of the reasons, which I'm sure some of you will resonate with, it's the fact that I had a very amazing chemistry teacher. He kind of like taught me a little bit more about what chemistry means, and then also what you can do with chemistry. So at that point, really early on in my career, I was really exposed to a lot of things about chemistry. That being said, the part of chemistry that really excited me the most, which you kind of like hear a little bit during my talk, is organic chemistry. So organic chemistry is a part of chemistry that essentially looks at like organic compounds, not necessarily the organic food that we see in Walmart or grocery stores, but looking more about like what organic compounds are and what they can do to you. So then, having grown up in this city, I moved to a different city, which is down south of the country. So I don't have the map of the country right here, but so imagine if this is Africa, Nigeria is somewhere around here. So this is where I'm from. So I was born in the southeast, and then I moved down south where I got my bachelor's in industrial chemistry. So essentially, my experience in high school led to me doing a bachelor's in industrial chemistry. Then after that, I moved really across the Atlantic Ocean, which was a very huge move at the time. I moved down to Missouri State University, which is in Springfield, where I then got my master's degree also in chemistry. Then once I worked, oh my bad, sorry. After that, I moved more west to University of Utah, which is where I am today in Salt Lake, working on getting my PhD in chemistry. So this is more like my story. I know everyone has different story, but I was really very much inspired by a very amazing chemistry teacher that I had in high school. So that being said, chemistry, the way we think about chemistry, it's in different divisions. Like literally, when you talk about chemistry is a very broad field, right? It's so hard for you to really know everything about chemistry. So that being said, what I'm going to tell you today, I probably know just a little bit of what I'm saying, right? So I'm going to try as much as possible to answer any questions that you have. And also, by the way, feel free to stop me and ask any question at any point. Or if you want to save it for later, that's also fine with me. But also, that also being said, I'm going to try to make this a little bit, like try to make it very interactive so that we can actually get a lot out of it today. So they're divided into 4 subdivisions. One is organic chemistry. So like I said, organic chemistry is really what looks at organic compounds. And when we talk about organic chemistry, really there are some atoms on the periodic table that we think about. So usually carbon, hydrogen, anything that has carbon and hydrogen, we start thinking about organic chemistry. Then when you look at inorganic chemistry, really what this tries to address is, okay, you probably have carbon and hydrogen in a compound. But the minute you have a metal, like if you say you have iron, gold, copper incorporated in the organic compound, then it becomes inorganic. That's why you still have the organic in it. But because you've introduced a foreign body, I would say, like a metal, then we refer to this type of chemistry in inorganic chemistry. Then physical chemistry, on the other hand, it's really more about the type of chemistry that studies the physical properties. What are the properties governing reactions that happen in chemistry? So you're looking at thermodynamics, you're looking at entropy, you're looking at if you heat up a compound, why does it dissolve? If you heat up water, why does it boil? Like looking at all those physical properties that involves those changes that you see. And then biochemistry is probably one that a lot of people are very much familiar with, where you're looking at proteins, DNA interactions, nucleic acid, ribosomes, different flavors of chemistry in the biological system. And then finally, you think about analytical chemistry. So really analytical chemistry is just the analysis, right? So all these things, you can make all these things, then it means you can also think about how you can analyze everything that you've made. So then that being said, where can we see chemistry? What are the places you can see chemistry in real life? So one thing that we can actually look at is polymers, right? So I should have also mentioned this, that when you talk about chemistry in real life, there are really not a lot of there's so many things to talk about, right? So I'm going to try to just focus on just few of them, just to give you a little bit flavor of what you have. So one that is really dear to me, it's the chemistry that you see in polymer. So really, what are polymers? I'm going to try to go into the next slide and talk a little bit about what polymers are. But I'm sure some of you have seen like polyethylene. I mean, you know, all these plastics, you know, like the cans that you make iPhones, semiconductors. So there's a lot of applications of polymers in various areas, right? So I think one that really comes to mind is like your plastic, anything that's plastic is essentially either made up of polyethylene, where you have high density polyethylene or low density polyethylene. So these are different polymers, right? This is actually how we draw them on paper. So really, for example, if you look at polyacetylene, really what a polymer means is that you have a small unit. So you have a small unit of acetylene that has a two carbon atom. So then you subject that into a process that is called polymerization. So upon polymerization, you are essentially like multiplying the number of molecules that you make. So N means how many molecules of that monomer you actually have. So let's say actually these polymers range from thousands or to millions of monomers, right? So depending on what kind of property you need, so you can control the number, you can control your N. Let's say, for example, you have the high density polyethylene and low density polyethylene. So high density, it's something that actually makes stronger plastic, and then low density makes more weaker plastics, depending on really the property you want. So controlling that molecular weight gives the plastics different properties. So this is one area where, for example, if you're just walking by and then you see any plastic thing, just know that it's made from polymer, and this polymer, it's a chemistry reaction to form really high molecular weight chemical compounds. So just to give you a little bit brief, just very brief example of these are two different polymers that you can use in very different applications. So polyester, it's probably one that you might somewhat be familiar with. So you know some of your fabrics are actually made of polyester. So how do you make this polyester? So this is a condensation between this diacid, so dicarboxylic acid between the diol. So this is known as a condensation reaction where you get rid of water. So upon the condensation, really what you're doing is that you're bringing these two together. This OH is reacting with the carboxylic, and then another molecule of OH reacting with the carboxylic. So it just keeps building. You just keep building it until you reach however molecular weight you need. So that's why you have the polyester. The monomer of the ester keeps repeating. It just keeps repeating. So that's why when you see these polymers on paper, people don't actually draw it all out. So you have it where you have N. So depending on really what you want, you can polymerize N to get to whatever molecular weight you need. Another example, which I'm sure you guys are also pretty much familiar with, is the nylon. So nylon 6,6, it's again another polymerization reaction between adipic acid and hexamethylene diamine. So it's exactly the same thing. The amine reacts with the carboxylic acid via a condensation reaction to get rid of water. Same thing. So it's growing on this end. It's also growing on the other end. So that's how you actually get your nylon 6,6. So there are different types of nylon. You can have nylon 6,6, nylon 6,4. So the name actually comes from the number of carbon chains on either the amine and the acid. So here you have one carbon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's why it's called nylon 6,6. So if I had adipic acid, if I had I think it's oxalic acid, which has 4 carbon chains, and then the tetramethylene diamine, that becomes a nylon 4,4. So it really depends on how many carbons you have. That's where the name comes from. So again, having said that, so these polymers really have various applications. I'm not going to talk about where you have all these type of applications, but I'm just going to put it out there. Does anyone know where else polymer can actually be applied? I mean, if not, it's fine. Okay, I'm going to assume no. Okay, so another applications you can actually see for these polymers. Again, like I said earlier, it really depends on what you want to use it for, right? So you have this bulletproof vest. So you can imagine that this type of vest will be made from really very strong polymers. I'm not exactly sure what these vests are made of. I think probably Kevlar. Kevlar is a very, very strong polymer that you can actually use for very strong materials. So you can also, oh yeah, so this is also another Kevlar product, which is the diving gloves. So walking boots, right? These boots that you actually use, these are actually made of different kind of polymer. The military helmets, it's also made of polymer. So you have this cotton cut resistant gloves, bicycle tires, car tires, fireproof clothing. So really, really a lot of plastics, a lot of applications of these polymers. So all these actually came from chemistry. So literally when you see these things around you, again, which is the goal, is start thinking about what kind of chemistry actually make up this type of materials. So also that being said, that's kind of like one thing that I try to do, I guess maybe because I'm a chemist, is when I see something, anything that I really don't know about, I'm like, okay, what is the chemistry behind it? Because I know that there has to be a chemistry there. So hopefully someone starts thinking that way. Another really application, which is one place that is kind of like near and dear to my heart, you're probably gonna hear this a lot throughout my talk. It's actually in drugs. So I think and the health or the medicine departments really gets a lot of, I say, it's really very improved by good synthetic chemists, right? So why I said that is like most drugs are actually isolated from either natural products, from plants, or from bacteria, from viruses. There are a lot of drugs that you get there. But one of the biggest challenges about getting these drugs from those sources that I mentioned is the fact that you are not going to be able to get enough for your studies as well as to treat people, right? So this is actually where chemistry really comes in handy. It's, let's say, for example, you discover this drug, avemicetine B1, which I think it's an antibiotic. I'm not 100% sure. But once you discover the drug, usually what people do, you isolate these drug compounds from nature. You characterize them, you study them and see if they have any activity against maybe a bacteria. The minute you get that, then it becomes a question that people need to address. It's like, okay, now we know that this actually is an antibacterial drug. But then how do you make enough quantities for people to actually, for this drug to be useful, right? So this is really where chemistry comes in super handy in the field in medicine, is that you need people to put together this molecule. This molecule, like again, I said, is probably in nature, but there's a way you can synthesize this in the lab. So I'm going to talk about, just briefly give you an example of how these things are being synthesized in lab. So just look at all these drug molecules. These are all things that you can actually make. You can make them in lab. Not this is actually how pharmaceutical industry make these drugs, is that they go into lab, find methods to actually assemble these molecules together. So I always have like friends that they talk about chemistry being abstract. It can be abstract, but really, when you actually really go into the field of chemistry, or when you're curious, you can now begin to see that, oh, really, it's not abstract, right? So when someone draws this type of molecule on paper, you're like, well, what does this mean? It doesn't mean anything. Cortisone, it's like, what does cortisone mean? It's just really an organic compound, which you can actually go into lab and synthesize. So I mean, this is a very bad example, but I mean, I'm sure some of us watch Breaking Bad. It's not a very good example, but it's an example of where you can actually use chemistry to make something. Again, not a very good example, but you can see how you can actually synthesize the methamphetamine, which is again a chemistry compound, or dopamine. This is also another chemistry compound that you can go in and synthesize. So I'm going to try to give at least an example of how a very simple drug molecule is made. So when you see a drug, it actually has a chemical structure, and it's something that can be made in lab. And this is what people do for a living. So another example, actually in health, it's something that kind of like blows my mind, to be honest. So I don't know how many people have had PET scan. So what PET stands for is positron emission tomography. So really, what this really looks at, it's looking at tissue. It's kind of exciting how this type of technology works. So you have this deoxyfluoroglucose, which has fluorine 18. So this fluorine 18 is a radioactive molecule. So really what it does is that you inject this into whatever tissue you want to study, either in the brain, wherever the tissue is. So this goes into the brain. So wherever you have a lot of, if you're like looking for a particular disease, so normal cells versus, let's say, cancerous cells or cells that are abnormal, so the deoxyfluoroglucose, this is a glucose, essentially a glucose that was just modified by adding fluorine onto it. So whatever abnormal cells are present in the tissue of interest, this deoxyfluoroglucose concentrates on those cells. The concentration of those cells leads to release of this fluorine 18, right? And then you can actually do image scanning, and then basically the concentration tells you, you can now do like the detection and be able to detect where this deoxyfluoroglucose concentrates, and usually it will concentrate on the abnormal cells. So here you can see a PET scan that shows normal and Parkinson's tissue. So this kind of scan can be used a lot in the brain to see really where you have both normal and abnormal cells. So essentially, you can basically transform the image you get and be able to see it in 3D, and doctors can easily actually read what these things mean. But then again, the take home is not really to go into the health, but it's really to show how just a very simple chemistry compound, this deoxyfluoroglucose, can actually enable doctors or people in the health industry to now see the tissues present in these different cells, either in the brain or in different tissues. Again, very easy, very simple. Like I said, I might not be able to go into everything. There's a lot of other applications of chemistry in health. Again, these things are made possible by chemists. So think about chemistry whenever you go to the hospital. There's a lot of chemistry that go in there. Okay, just to give you a little brief idea about how these things are made. And again, like I said, by the way, if anyone has any question at any point, please feel free to answer. So again, like I said, these drug molecules are actually made by synthetic chemists, right? So I'm going to show you here. I'm showing you a very good example. So this is a typical reaction setup. So let's say you want to make Tylenol, for example, paracetamol, which you guys everyone takes. So there are different modified routes to make this Tylenol. There are different ways you can actually make Tylenol. So first of all, you take this phenol, and then you throw in acetic anhydride, for example, right? So if you think about really the first step, what you're doing is you're going to have to buy the phenol, buy acetic anhydride, or if those are not commercially available, you synthesize them also. So really what chemists do is synthesizing these things. So you throw in all of them in a flask. So this is what the flask looks like. It's kind of like some kind of reaction vessel. And then this is like your heating mantle. Let's say you want to run your reaction at 100 degrees, then you're going to have to boil it. So you're going to have to find something that actually takes the temperature. And then you have something like your reflux condenser that helps you not to build so much pressure. So you don't want to have a lot of pressure being built on the flask, and you also don't want the solvent actually evaporating. So these things are always going to be happening more like in a closed open system, where you can control the temperature with the thermometer, make sure the temperature doesn't change, and then you can do your synthesis. So a very good example is synthesis of Tylenol, where if you take this phenol and then you react that. So I don't expect you guys to know any of these things, but just kind of like start thinking about how these things are made in real time. So you take this phenol, react with acetic anhydride, and then you get the acetyl group incorporated. You react that with amino hydroxyamine, and then you get the hydroxyamine, and then refluxing that with trifluoroacetic acid and thionic chloride gets you to the Tylenol. Really, this is what it is, right? So you synthesize the what we call the active pharmaceutical ingredient. So it's called API. So the active pharmaceutical ingredient in Tylenol, it's really this molecule, this amide. But there's also like a lot that goes into drug molecule formulation, right? So when you take Tylenol, it doesn't really mean that it only contains this paracetamol, right? It contains several other additives, polymers, things that can help with solubility, things that can help with taste so that it's not too bitter, things that can help you swallow. So there's a lot of formulation that go into it. But in all those formulations, really the main thing that is doing the job is this API or this hydroxyamide. So that is why we call them the APIs, because that's what does the chemistry. Okay, so to talk a little bit about what happens for you to synthesize this. So when you do this reaction, for example, you do the very first reaction. So it doesn't mean that this is the only thing you get out. So there's what we call side reactions. So these side reactions are things that could be happening on the side. What that means is that you do the reaction, you're going to have to think about how to get this pure, right? Because if you have other side products, you don't want to carry that to the next step. That's also one thing that the pharmaceutical industry really cares so much about. It's getting the purity of your product to, if not close to 100%, nothing is 100%, but as close to 99.9%, so that if the other 1% is not detrimental to you when you take it. So these are all the things that I'm taking into consideration. So usually, how do we do this? Two different ways. One way, it's we run what we call a column chromatography. So this is just a chromatography to separate different compounds. So let's say you are really interested in this compound in the middle. So once you're done with the reaction, you put it in a silica and you try to separate different fractions. So this is a column that is being run. So you can see this yellow band. It's kind of what you're interested in. So over time, it separates nicely, and then you can start collecting it. So once you start collecting the yellow band, that could be the product you're interested in. So then that way you can see things that are left on top of the column. These are things that you don't need. So once you're done collecting the one you need, then you essentially get rid of the rest of the materials. There's a lot of characterizations that go into figuring out that this is actually the compound you need. We're not going to go into that. Then another example, it's actually what we call recrystallization. So for those of you that have actually watched Breaking Bad, so that's actually what he does. He does the process known as recrystallization. So recrystallization, it's a little bit more, I would say, in terms of purity, it gives you more pure compound. So you can see these very white crystals. When you do a recrystallization, in case you haven't seen Breaking Bad, you probably, it's a good, not the best chemistry show, but it teaches you a little bit about chemistry. What it does really in the purification process is to recrystallize the meth to get it really pure. So that's another process that is used a lot in pharmaceutical industry. So one is the column chromatography and recrystallization. Okay, so switching gears from really chemistry in synthesis as well as in health and medicine. So I really want to talk about like really the chemistry that happens kind of like in you. So this is one that I think probably I don't think too much deeply about, but really the process of respiration, right? You take in oxygen, it goes in through your lungs, it does its chemistry. Really what is happening is chemistry. And then the process of exhalation, which is where you now take out carbon dioxide. So as we are sitting right now, this process is happening. Like it's just happening. You have oxygen coming, and then you breathe out carbon dioxide. So really, what is the chemistry there? Really a very straightforward chemistry where your glucose needs oxygen for the process that we call oxidation. So glucose itself, it's a way you store energy, right? You need energy. So that's why you say, oh, you should take this carbohydrate, take this sugar, take this in so you can have energy. So you're taking that food, but some chemistry has to happen on the food for you to have energy. So it's a very simple chemistry. What happens is that oxygen reacts with the glucose via an oxidation step and then gets you CO2, water, and energy. So this energy is in form of ATP, which we're not going to talk about. But essentially, the process of respiration, the process of inhalation of oxygen gives you energy, right? So if you're not able to breathe in oxygen, you're going to completely lose all energy, and that's probably how some people also like pass out, because you don't have enough energy to have your system running. Then on the other side, the process of exhalation, it's when you have, so this is exhalation essentially. When you take in oxygen, you get out CO2. That's an oxidation step. So the reduction step is where water in the presence of CO2 combines to give you oxygen. So a typical example of that is where you have photosynthesis. So photosynthesis takes away the CO2 that the humans get, combines that with water, and then produces oxygen and glucose, right? So this is a reverse reaction. The forward reaction is used by humans, while the backward reaction is used by plants. So plant needs the CO2 that you have, combines that with water to make glucose and oxygen. So the glucose is what you get from the plants. So essentially that's kind of like a cycle. So all this respiration and photosynthesis wouldn't have been possible without chemistry, right? So even though you see plants growing, again, that's kind of like the goal of this lecture for me, is to make you start thinking a little bit about, okay, what is the chemistry? This plant is green, this plant is red. Why could it be? What is making this possible, right? So start thinking about like the chemistry behind it, and then like try to see if you understand how the process works. So I think this is probably one of the last examples that I will show you today. It involves coffee, maybe one of the last. So coffee is something that we take kind of like every day. Trust me, I actually didn't know this until I did a lab that actually involves extraction of coffee in tea. So really, what is happening here? What is happening here is you have your coffee that you make from these coffee seeds, right? Again, kind of like in the sense of drug. So the active ingredients in coffee is caffeine, which you guys probably already know. So what I'm just showing you is that this caffeine is an organic molecule. So it has this structure. So this is something that if you tell me, Chideraa, I need caffeine, I can go into lab and synthesize the caffeine for you, for example, a very pure caffeine, right? So this is again where chemistry is very powerful. You can really use the power of synthesis to synthesize several things. So let's say because the coffee seeds, it's literally everywhere, right? So this is easy. You can actually extract the caffeine from the coffee seed, which is how you make your coffee, and then you can drink coffee. But if indeed we didn't have enough seeds, then you're gonna start relying on chemists to actually synthesize caffeine for you. But luckily enough, we have good enough coffee seeds, so we don't have to rely on chemists making it. But here, anyways, the bottom line is this caffeine has a chemical structure. So this is the structure of caffeine. So really what is doing is again a chemical process which involves different oxidation. I really don't know how that works, but there's a lot of pharmacokinetics and dynamics that go into the mode of action or mechanism of caffeine. And then I think really finally, I really want to end on this note, which is by asking a question. I mean, I didn't have the question here, but if anyone wants to answer or is interested, does anyone at all know why water has a very high boiling point? So water is just H2O, right? It's very simple molecule, hydrogen and oxygen. But at standard atmospheric pressure, water boils at 100 degrees. So does anyone have any guess as to why water will have a very high boiling point?
Is it because of the hydrogen bonds?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good answer. So really, right? So this is another part of chemistry that people can start thinking about. So hydrogen bond, what does it mean? It's really you have a delta negative charge on oxygen and a delta positive charge on hydrogen. So you have oxygen-hydrogen interaction. So they're all interacting. So essentially, you're just going to form a huge molecule of water. You're going to form a huge, so this hydrogen bonding keeps happening. You could have 1,000 molecules of hydrogen all in one H2O. So for you to have water boil, you have to break all those hydrogen bonding. So because of that, you require a lot of energy. For something as simple as H2O to boil, it's that you need to break all those hydrogen bonding. So that's another really chemistry facts in just something as simple as water. So there's a lot of research. Actually, you will not really imagine how much research that goes into all the properties of water, why water floats when it's frozen. So much chemistry. So really, there's way much chemistry that I talked about today. But it's something that you can always like go in and try to figure out, oh, what is the chemistry here? What is the chemistry there? And like I said again, I think really the goal is to get people excited about chemistry. I will really close by asking another question. So I described chemistry, community, health, environment, medicine, industry, science, teaching, research, and then you. I probably give one, let's say 20% of example, if not even up to 20%, 5% of the examples. So does anyone have any question or anything he or she thinks about where else chemistry can be? Yes.
I have a question on your PET scan slide.
Okay.
So with the 18 fluorine, you briefly mentioned how it goes and you inject it. First question is, do you know how or where they inject it? Like, is it through an IV or do they just like do they do it through like liposomes or?
Yeah, that's a very good question that I might not necessarily have an answer to, but I think depending on what tissue cell you wanna study, yeah, I don't know. I'll probably think.
Okay.
Yeah, I honestly don't know, but really it depends on like the targets. If you're targeting the brain, then you wanna find a way to get it right into the brain, then because you want it to concentrate on the brain, and then this radiofluorine 18, it's gonna give off gamma rays, and then it essentially like centers on wherever you want to study. Yeah, so the medicine, yeah, I don't really know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question that I probably should figure out how it's done.
I Google searched it. The first, like just the most simple Google search says that it's intravenous depending on which part is being looked at.
Okay, that's what because yeah, for my research, we're actually trying to figure out how to do that. So it's not an easy answer, but I was hoping you would know so I could just be like, oh, that's how we do it.
Okay, yeah, unfortunately I don't. Thanks, Stephanie. Okay, so does anyone know some other example of chemistry in everyday, like things that you see, you kind of curious about, or just more like a comment?
I mean, I have another one if no one else wants to.
Yes, please go, Greg.
So I have a question about, I remember in my Gen Chem 2 class, I think my teacher mentioned like tomato juice for if your dog gets sprayed by a skunk and it like chemistry something makes the smell go away. Do you know anything about that?
That's actually a good one. Yeah, I really don't know. Like I said, there's so much chemistry in everything.
Yeah.
That
I just remember her saying it, and I'm like, how the heck does that work?
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably some active ingredient in the tomato that does some chemistry with whatever produces the smell. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that one.
That was a crazy one.
Any questions? Because that's pretty much it. That's pretty much like kind of like what I wanted to share. Just get people start thinking a little bit about chemistry, and yeah, so great. Like that's a very good question. It's something that really, it's kind of like, I would say, now that you asked it, I'm gonna go Google it and try to figure out what the chemistry is, because that's what I like to do. Is like, okay, this is happening. What is the chemistry? There has to be some chemistry to it. If there's no chemistry, yeah, maybe it shouldn't be happening. but but yeah, I don't know. I'll go Google that one to figure out the actual chemistry behind it. But thanks for the question, though.
If no one else has questions or comments or anything they want to talk about, we can end, which is totally fine. You have 19 extra minutes. Well, by the time I finish talking, 17 extra minutes in your morning. For those of you watching the video, again, please go to the education series page and click on that evaluation form, fill it out so that I know that you watched the video. And I'll put the link back in the chat just in case that's helpful for anyone who logged in after we put it in the first time. Thank you, Chideraa. I really appreciate how enthusiastic you are about chemistry. It terrifies me, but watching you be excited about it makes it way more interesting.
Thank you, Stephanie, for having me.